Hello and welcome to Adam Talks with me, Adam Carruthers. No surprises there. This is a special series of interviews with journalists from The Athletic to preview UEFA Euro 2020. Before you at me on Twitter, it is still called 2020, even though it's set in 2021. So to introduce into the conversation, we have the Athletics France correspondent, Amy Lawrence, and the Athletics Germany correspondent in Raphael Honigstein. Hopefully you don't mind me calling you Rafa. Is that okay?
I've been called much worse.
Okay, it won't happen on this show. I can promise you that. Amy, your name is short enough, so I think Amy will do. I'm not going to call you A. Before we talk about the teams, just a little glance at the group itself. Hungary, they won their playoffs to secure a spot in the finals for the fourth time. Their best ever finish was in 1964. It's been a long time. They hadn't appeared at a finals from 72 till 2016, but have now made it in back-to-back appearances. Portugal, they finished runner-up in their group, which was B, set to make their 8th appearance at the finals. They, of course, head into the tournament as reigning champions of Europe. France were winners of their group, which was H. They're making their 10th appearance at the finals. They won it on 2 occasions, 1984 and 2000. They, if you need any reminding, were losing finalists during the last tournament on home soil. And finally, to round off the group, we've got Germany, who won Group C to book their slot and have lots of pedigree in the tournament, having won it 3 times and are set to make their 13th appearance in the tournament. Now, all matches for this group, which is Group F, although I feel it should be Group D for death. All matches to be played at either the Puskas Arena in Budapest or the Allianz Arena in Munich. So, Rafa, let's jump in straight to your forte, which is Germany. One final hurrah for Joachim Löw.
Well, maybe, or one final disaster for Joachim Löw. I mean, no Bundes trainer, no national German manager has ever overseen 2 bad tournaments in a row, has ever been allowed to do that. I think there is a danger that Germany will have another poor competition simply because of the strength of the other teams in that group, but also because they botched this transition a little bit after the World Cup. Löw had this big idea of developing a new side with new tactics. Basically, it was all very stop and start. And now towards the end of his reign, he said, okay, forget all that. We'll start again and we'll take some of the old guys back. So, I mean, it's natural for Germans to feel very apprehensive before a big tournament. And I'm sure you've all heard it before many times and just shrug your shoulders. But expectations are not very high in Germany at this point.
I can imagine. He seems to be flip-flopping, Amy, deciding between, I don't want the old guys in, but now I do want them in. Is that a sign of good leadership for you?
The proof will be in the pudding, I think, there. I can definitely remember past experiences with France, for example, doing something similar. I mean, Zidane famously retired from international football and came back in and nearly, got his team to the World Cup final. And he was not alone. He came back with fellow members of his generation. It can be very inspiring. It can be that classic case of trying to get one last beautiful hurrah, which ends up not so harmonious. So it's a bold one, but I guess if he felt that he couldn't trust his team without them, he's, like Rafa says, no manager has had the regret, the reputation of 2 bad tournaments. Perhaps he feels I've got to go for experience. I think most managers tend to lean on experience if they're a bit panicky.
Yeah.
Right. Or wrong.
It's interesting to bring up the France analogy. We've had Claude Makélélé out here. I remember he talked about it and he said it felt like Zidane was getting the band back together. But in that situation, it was the players' decision to declare themselves available for international duty. For this, in Germany, it's very much on the manager, Rafa. So what is the reasoning behind bringing back some of the old guard?
Well, I think there are 2 reasons. First, as Amy alluded to, I think in the absence of those 2, plus Jerome Boateng, some of the players who have been given time to develop haven't quite done it. There are problems in defense. There are problems, maybe not so much up front, but problems with organization and leadership up front. And I think that's where Thomas Müller is being wanted for this particular tournament. Müller is somebody who is almost a coach on the pitch. He talks a lot. He motivates people. He is highly intelligent, so he can decide, okay, let's press at this given moment. This is a weak spot. I don't know if there's actually a natural place for him in the team. That's another interesting discussion, because Germany have moved sort of towards a 4-3-3 where he's not really happy playing in one of the wide positions, unless you're playing through the middle, which has never been a great success either. But Löw felt that him and Hummels were necessary, but there's also, I think, an element of, how shall I delicately put this, of maybe insulating himself against some of the criticism that would have come his way if Germany get knocked out and he hasn't picked these guys. I think at least by picking these guys, you can say he's done the thing that most people wanted. He's been a little bit political and just makes it easier for him to be criticized for other things rather than this one on top of that. I mean, it's not going to do much for him if they get knocked out anyway, but things might have been worse if he'd been seen as stubborn and, you know, completely beyond the public's wishes. Certainly with Müller, I think it was very difficult to leave him out simply because of the way that the season that he's had this season for Bayern.
Yeah. And the presence off the pitch as well, Amy. We've all seen videos of Thomas Müller. He looks like a fun guy to be around. And I guess it's nice to have that presence when he's running around shouting Robert Lewandowski. Was that what he said earlier this season?
I wonder how that goes down with his teammates. It's one thing impressing international fans, but I mean, you know, Rafa, do they like it or do they find it a bit of a cringe?
Difficult to say. I mean, Müller is a very, very funny guy. It doesn't always translate, I think, into English. But speaking to him in German, he's usually very, very good. And he's also become really adept at analyzing games. I mean, you speak to him after a game, even on television, he will give you a total breakdown of what happened, why it happened, what could have gone better, what didn't go well enough. And I think especially in this pandemic time, people have perhaps woken up to the fact just how influential he is because you can hear him. Before that, of course, in the full stadiums, nobody could hear, but the guy really directs everyone. Before somebody picks up the ball in midfield, he's already told them where to put it. And that can be a little bit annoying, I guess. But if you know it's actually a good advice, and if it frees you up to make that decision a little bit quicker, it helps you. And I think that's one of the reasons why Löw felt, okay, we'll have to put him in. But as I said, I don't know where he's going to play unless Germany change back to the 4-2-3-1 that they used to play a few years ago, where he was behind the striker. It's really difficult. Might have to play out on the wide, which of course is not his preferred position.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about established names. I want to make mention of someone who's very up and coming. Jamal Musiala's, his rise has been astronomical. He's played for England and Germany at youth level. He's declared himself, of course, for the German national team. He's formerly of Chelsea. The pedigree is there, Amy. Youngest player for Bayern in the Bundesliga, the youngest goal scorer too. Top of that, he's the youngest Champions League scorer of both German and English heritage. How excited are you to see him at this platform, at this stage, which is the Euros?
Well, I think it's normal for any kind of prodigy to, when they have an international tournament in front of them and we're all sitting here watching, they know there's a lot of scrutiny. And I'm curious to know how psychologically he will manage that. Because if he can relax and play his football, and I think everybody can remember the impact that Mbappe had very recently at the last World Cup, a teenager coming in, everybody knows there's a huge whirlwind around this guy. And he just was able to, you know, explode in front of our eyes. And it's such an exciting thing to see when you see a new talent and we're not quite sure how they're going to manage. He's maybe coming into it depends if people are expecting him to be the game changer for Germany, to have that responsibility, that's quite a lot to put on young shoulders. Raf, is he the kind of guy who looks built to cope with that?
Well, physically he doesn't, because he's so slender and slight and he looks like a little boy still. But I think mentally he's already shown, you know, starting in big Champions League games against Lazio, for example, for Bayern, that he's completely unfazed by everything. I mean, he can come on, he can start. I don't think he will because there are others ahead of him in this team. But if Germany needs someone to unpick very deep defenses, maybe have an idea, you know, some kind of inspiration late on, they could do a lot worse than bringing him on. I don't think we're going to see too much of him, unfortunately. in this tournament. But the fact that he's part of the squad, in a squad that has options up front, that's one area where Germany looked quite good. I don't think it'll say much about his ability if he doesn't play. It's the opposite. The fact that he's in the squad in the first place really reflects his talent.
On that note, who's the most important player for Germany, in your opinion? Raphael, would it be one of the old guard? Would it be someone like Manuel Neuer?
Well, if Manuel Neuer is Germany's most important player, we're in trouble because it means that we're up against it, and we will be up against it. I think in terms of the influence of the whole Germany, setup and how they're supposed to play, and especially finding that balance that has often been missing in teams with Joachim Löw. I think Joshua Kimmich is the single most important player. He's the one guy that can knit things together in that central position. He's a number 6, he's number 8. Sometimes he plays slightly on the right when he's going forward. He's everywhere. And him having a good tournament and sort of almost taking Germany with him to where Bayern are as much as he can, that's going to make the difference. So it's absolutely vital that he will be the most important player for Germany. If he's not, or if for whatever reason what he does is not enough, then Germany will have a really hard time getting out of this group.
Tell you what, there's a contrast between Germany and France in that the expectations for both nations, they differ vastly. But there's also a parallel because a member of the old guard has been brought back into the fold. And it's an interesting decision. Karim Benzema, I mean, he's had a stellar season. Real Madrid, probably their best player throughout the entire campaign. He did not let Zidane down. He did not let the club down. And he's hoping not to let France down. But what do you make of the decision to include him, Amy?
Adam, I'll be honest with you. And if you'd have asked me to bet $1 million on this happening, I wouldn't have put a cent. I mean, everything that predates his return to the French squad led you to think that it was an impossibility. Didier Deschamps, for all the stellar campaigns that Benzema has had previous to this one, was unmovable in his very hardline approach, that he just wasn't someone he was willing to have in the group. And what you were saying before about Thomas Müller actually really chimed with something that I think is at the absolute core of how Deschamps wants to run his squad. He's almost obsessed about the idea of team harmony, the idea that when you play a tournament, you live a tournament. And when you live a tournament, you have 30 guys or 40 or however, including the coaching staff and the players and the support staff, who are living together morning, noon and night, who are eating together, who are training together, who are playing together, who are not quite sleeping together, but you catch my drift. They are in and out of each other's pockets and sight lines all day long for 5 or 6 weeks. And I think it comes from his own experience as a player. And of course, he won the World Cup and Euros, Deschamps, as a player, that he recognized that this is a critical point. If you want to win, you have to have the most livable with environment that people can feel good about themselves and each other and the team and the mission for in excess of a month. And for that reason, from the day he took the job, he just has not been interested in picking people who he worried could be destabilizing to the atmosphere. And so, for example, the reason he loves someone like Olivier Giroud is because he's a great guy in that environment. And so the value that he brings on the pitch is one thing, but the value he brings to living a tournament is off the scale. So when he's kind of marking him, his overall mark is weighted a bit because a guy like that is someone he wants around.
You're just explaining why Benzema is not in the squad, Amy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think what I'm trying to do is explain quite how shocking this was, because it goes against everything that Deschamps has been the national team manager for 9 years now. You know, he had more than 100 caps as a player and now more than 100 games as a manager of France. It's a huge mountain of experience in that, around that camp. And he's done something very unexpected. So I'm fascinated by it, because to make such an about turn is out of character. And it tells you a couple of things. And I think the thing it tells you the most of all is how much, in the end, above all, that Deschamps is a winner. How much his mentality is based on bottom line, can we win this thing? And can he help us? Okay, we do it. So I would have adored to be a fly on the wall of the conversations that took place between Benzema and Deschamps to make this reconciliation possible, because it must have come both ways. For it's not just that it needed Deschamps to say, we want you back. It needed Benzema to say, I want to come back as well, because he was obviously hurt by the years of being a pariah, frustrated, to be an elite player at the top of your game, at the top of the European game for years, and feel that the door has completely been locked forever for international football. It's not like he could turn around and go, oh, well, that's one of those things. That must have killed him, especially when they won the World Cup. So I think there really needed to be an amazing meet in the middle on both parties for this to happen. And it's tremendously exciting on one level for France, because it strengthens them compared to the world champions, to have an attacking pivot who can also score goals. But it also does bring that tiny element of risk of whether, if it does go wrong, if the atmosphere turns, if results are not quite what's expected, if pressures come suddenly to bear, and people's noses are put out of joint or whatever, there is a gamble attached to this entire situation.
Yeah. And again, historically speaking, France have previous history of harmony affecting the squad, or rather a lack of harmony, refusing to get off buses and all of that. So you do wonder, Rafa, I mean, how is Giroud going to take it? Because we all saw the comments that were made publicly comparing them to cars.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about cars, but I think Giroud must feel that this is a reflection on him to a certain extent. I think if Giroud was still the guy that would be trusted to lead France, albeit in his typical way, where he doesn't necessarily score the goals, but provides the space, provides the physical presence for others to thrive behind him, I don't think we would be having this conversation. But I think Didier Deschamps has noted that Giroud's game time has gone down and down and down, that perhaps he cannot be trusted to lead the line. And he felt Benzema, having such a fantastic season, is the right guy. And in many ways, that slightly more passive approach that we've seen with France in the past suits Benzema, because he is the guy that is always dropping, linking up. He's not going to be necessarily waiting all the way up front. He comes into midfield, he helps soak up the pressure, and then he's so good on the ball. And I think if he wasn't there, you'd almost have to invent him. The issue is all the other things that Amy's talked about. Does that outweigh all the other concerns? I personally think that France are so good that it probably doesn't matter whether they're harmonious or not harmonious. Of course, a lot of people thought the same in 2002, and that turned out very different. But I think that Didier Deschamps has a much firmer grip than perhaps previous managers on this team, and I think there's very little danger of them not fulfilling their potential. So Benzema in or out, I don't think it really matters. France are head and shoulders above everyone else.
It's interesting, just to jump in there, Raf. I was speaking to a colleague of both of ours who's French, who his gut feeling is this is all going to go wrong and they won't get out the group because of it. So,
I hope he's
that
right.
might be a very glass, third full or quarter full speaking. But, there is a school of thought there that this is a monster of a group and there is no margin for error. And one off game, you're not going to make it necessarily.
Rafa's effectively saying they had the best squad in the entire tournament. I think and not putting words in your mouth, am I, Rafa? That's pretty much what you just said moments ago.
Yes.
So, Amy, following up from that, is there a weakness in this squad? Are you in agreement of Rafa it is the strongest?
It's absolutely amongst the strongest. I mean, when you bear in mind that they are world champions, and although that's a little bit longer ago than normal, being 3 years ago, there's still the core of that team involved in this squad, and it's been enhanced. So they do have amazing quality. There was a concern, and maybe the one area where there's a question mark is who is the best choice of partner for Varane at the centre of defence. Various people have been tried over the last couple of years and nobody has quite nailed that spot. It's looking like probably Kimpembe, or possibly using Hernandez, who plays fullback mostly and did it the last World Cup as a centre back. But that seems to be sort of the only question mark. But I think when you look at particularly their luxury of riches up front and the qualities that they have with Conte and Pogba in particular in midfield, and Pogba tends to be a slightly different player for France than he does for Manchester United on a more consistent basis. I think he really feels the love there. I think he really feels the freedom to express himself. There was a concern when Conte at one stage wasn't getting that much football for Chelsea. Obviously that has been obliterated, and he's come back in such immense style that, you know, they're looking ready. And I think the fact that they have that World Cup win behind them and they're wanting to create that double is a huge motivation.
Yeah, we have to move on. We really could just spend another 20 minutes talking about France or Germany. But what about Portugal? Rafa, you look at their attacking lineup, and it feels strange to say this, but are they dark horses for you? I know they are the reigning champions, which is why it does feel odd. But when you have Ronaldo, Andre Silva, Bernardo Silva, João Felix, Diogo Jota, Bruno Fernandes, there are goals in this side that can threaten any opposition they face.
Yeah, and you didn't even mention Andre Silva, who's been in fantastic form, and I think will earn a big move on the back of his form and maybe on the back of more goals at the Euros. But getting into this team is going to be hard enough for him. I mean, they have tremendous quality. They also have a certain Ruben Dias in defense, who's, you know, not done too badly for City. They're a very good side. I think they're much better than they were 5 years ago. I don't think this was a particularly good Euro team. I think Portugal slightly fluked it, the way, if you look at the results in the group stage and the way they played throughout, even the final, not one of the more convincing winners in recent times. But I think this team is built to do something special. The problem is the same that Germany have, and maybe France to a lesser degree. Getting out of the group is not going to be straightforward. I mean, there is the insurance, I guess, of the two best third place teams going through as well. So you might just about go through if you just beat Hungary really heavily. But of course, you can't rely on that. It's difficult to see them as dark horses because they're already, I think, part of the established elite. I don't think they have what it takes to go all the way, because I see France, for example, as a stronger side, but making it to the semi-final or so, I think is eminently feasible.
Yeah, I did not see them winning the tournament a few years back, particularly with Ronaldo having to be subbed off rather early in the game. I don't want to sit here and talk about Cristiano Ronaldo. We know what a fabulous player he is. I want to have a quick mention of Renato Sanches, how he's had a renaissance, Amy. He's still only 23 years old. He's the former Golden Boy winner in 2016. He won the tournament with them at the age of 18. He is still a youngster. Seems so promising at Benfica, got that move to Bayern, but his star seemed to fade when he moved to Swansea on loan. Really had minimal impact there. But he's been revitalized at Lille. And let's not forget, he's won titles in Benfica, in Germany, and most recently in France. So are you going to be keeping a close eye on him?
Definitely. I mean, I think pretty much anyone from that Lille side is probably every scout in Europe has been keeping a close eye on them. I think it's been such a fact when you spell it out like that. He really has had a fascinating young career, full of some pretty extreme moments. And I think there's always that question with a young player when they come through, if they are moving from place to place to place to place, there's a question mark as to why. There's obviously promise there, but is there a reason why people can't unlock it in a more trusted way? So I hope for his sake that that whole experience has matured him somewhat so that he can go on. I mean, he's still got peak years ahead of him to, you know, really convince and really demonstrate why he had those accolades of being Golden Boy and being a winner so young. But yeah, definitely one of those players that you want to see, okay, where are you now? Where's your level now? And to test yourself in this group before you think about even going any further is going to be a real good test for him.
A quick mention of him as well, Rafa, because Bayern Munich is a club which I'm sure you know very well.
Yeah, and it was a big disappointment really to never see him play at the same level. He had problems adjusting. I think then the move to Cardiff did not work out at all. It was he was very, very lost there.
Swansea,
sorry, always get those two mixed up. He didn't look happy, I think, living away from his family and living in a very different environment. And we could never really see the Renato Sanches that shone so brightly at Euro 2016. Some players take a little bit longer. Some players have a really quick start and then fall away and then never quite reach the same levels again for whatever reasons. Human beings don't necessarily work in linear ways. There's up and downs, there's detours. But it is, as Amy, I think, said, almost a slightly romantic story to think that somebody who was hyped so much and then fell short by so much could actually come back and show people that he is the real deal after all. Be really looking forward to seeing him in action for Portugal.
To cap things off, we don't have too much time to discuss him, but Hungary in the competition, zero expectations, I think you can say, given the competition they have in the group, Amy. Do you think they have enough in them to spring a surprise? You're smiling, you're laughing gently there.
I'm just thinking how thrilled they must have been when the draw was made,
True.
Hey, look what you've got. Look, I'm pretty sure that their expectations are realistic. It would be ambitious to be hoping too highly that they're going to get out the group. But, they have got games on home soil in Budapest. And, I'm sure that if there's particularly some crowds allowed in, that they'll be hoping to put on a good show. They have got, one or two players of high repute. But I think realistically speaking, getting out the group is probably too big an ask. One great result, I think they should be pretty pleased with if they can achieve it.
Yeah. Hoping something can capture the imagination of fans around the globe. Raphael, I remember the Tracky Bottoms, the keeper, which he ended up selling on his own website. I know he's retired, so we're not going to see him there, but anything that you can expect from Hungary, do you feel?
Yeah, no Gabo Kirai in his grey jogging trousers this time. I mean, Dominik Szoboszlai is the player that we all want to watch. Unfortunately, he's hardly kicked a ball of the last 6 months, moved to Leipzig and hasn't played for them because of injury. So I think there will be concerns just how ready he is. They have a very good goalkeeper in Peter Gulaschi. I think he's going to be very, very busy and might to make a name for himself is the wrong way because he's already been in the semi-final of the Champions League, of course. But I think people might be aware just how good he is even a bit more after this Euros because he'll be probably the busiest of the Hungarian players.
Yeah, he certainly sensed it. What a route he's had to be where he is now, from being at Liverpool all those years ago to semi-finals of the Champions League. Okay, we have to get some quick fire predictions in. Who's going to win the tournament? I'm going to guess who your prediction is, Rafa, but just want to hear it from you yourself.
Yeah, it is France again. I say that with a heavy heart, not because I don't like France, but because it probably means that Germany are going to have a pretty hard time. But it's impossible for me to look beyond France.
Amy?
I'll go France as well. They're the country that I follow, so I'm hoping to go all the way with them.
Will you be the busiest member of the athletic team, considering you are the correspondent for France?
Well, I'll take that.
Okay. The dark horses. We semi-written off Portugal has been classified as a dark horse. What do you say, Rafa? Who's your pick?
Don't
say Belgium.
No, I don't think we can say Belgium. I think Belgium are among the contenders. Maybe not quite at France's level, but they should do well. If you look sort of a tier lower, then there's an argument that Denmark could have a pretty good competition. I think they're in a group that lends itself to a surprise or two. But also, I think that the Dutch are maybe where the Belgians were a few years ago. I think they're not the most accomplished team. They're not incredibly convincing. They will lack Virgil van Dijk, which is a big miss for them. But they have real talent, and I think nobody expects too much of them. So in that sense, I think they could be the dark horse of this competition.
Amy, what do you reckon? England?
I'm going to look at shout out a few teams who I don't expect to win or get necessarily that far, but three teams who did really rather well in qualifying. So, could have a good run. Ukraine, Wales, and Finland are all countries that, that could pat themselves on the back for really an excellent qualification. So perhaps one of them will have a decent run, and why not?
Rafa, Golden Boot.
It's very, very hard to predict. It tends to be won by the winner or somebody who plays for the winner. So that would say France, but then they have a difficult group, so they might not score that many goals to begin with. I like the chances of Romelu Lukaku because Belgium have one of the easier groups, and if you are going to rack up the numbers, the goals, they don't tend to come in semi-finals and finals. They tend to come early on. So just simply sort of for mathematical reasons, I think he's got a very good chance of winning the Golden Boot.
And heading into the tournament in excellent form as champions of Italy as well. Amy, what do you think?
Very convincing case there, Rafa. Tempted to go along with you. I think just for the hell of it, I'll pick a Frenchman who isn't getting the headlines at the moment, but still has a great tendency to score important goals. And I think, again, he has that ability to play for his country in a way that's different to the way he plays for his club, and that's Griezmann. There'll be a lot on Benzema and Mbappe, but Griezmann is always floating around, particularly when he plays for France, and has that knack. So let's see if he suddenly gets a great tour. I think he'll be really hungry for it because he'll feel like he hasn't enjoyed his football perhaps as much as he would have wanted in the last couple of seasons. So it's a platform for him to kind of maybe let out a bit of that frustration.
No pun intended by you saying Hungary then. Just the issue of fairness, the next three predictions, which are the final ones, I'm going to start with you, Amy. So maybe Rafa can copy from your cheat sheet here. Golden Glove.
I think I was thinking about this, and I think the Golden Glove often owes a lot to the, what should be the golden defence in front of them. And I do think Portugal might not concede that many goals. So I'm quite tempted to see if it might go Portugal's way. That
seems to indicate that you believe they're going to get through the group as well, maybe at the expense of Germany.
Sorry, Rafa.
Yeah, well, it's not impossible. I think Manuel Neuer might be the Golden Glove for the same reasons. I mean, I don't know if you can give it to someone who doesn't get all the way, but I think he'd be, unfortunately, very busy, very exposed. And if he, can save Germany a couple of times, maybe a little bit like Oliver Kahn did in 2002 when he and Michael Ballack lifted a very ordinary Germany team all the way to the final.
He was amazing in 2002, Oliver
Kahn. So I think Neuer's got a chance, even though he probably doesn't want to necessarily be in contention.
Yeah, it was also heartbreaking for Olivier Kahn in 2002. His errors leading to the goals which handed victory to Brazil, redemption for Ronaldo. But the player of the tournament, Amy, who's going to be the standout? Who's the one that we're going to be talking about when everything's done and dusted?
Do you know what? I'm not sure he'll be player of the tournament, but he's someone I absolutely, really, really looking forward to seeing on that stage, and that's Phil Foden.
Yeah.
Throwing that one in there.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not going to disagree. I think we are recording this before the Champions League final. All eyes will be on that as well. Rafa?
Maybe not the most original choice, but I think Kylian Mbappe could make this his tournament. I see France going all the way. I see France being very strong. And he is France's best player. So again, the odds are that he's going to have a fantastic tournament and will win it for France and win individual trophies as well along the way.
All right. Final one is the disappointment of the tournament. I know we don't want to end things on a negative note, but it is a headline grabber. So Amy, what's your prediction? This could be a team. It could be a player. It could be a manager, anything, absolutely anything.
And my disappointment is that it's not a normal tournament in the sense of fans being, there as in the way that you'd like. I've been so very, very fortunate to attend many World Cups and Euros in my life. And the moments that, in a way, that I love best are sometimes away from grounds, in the towns, when you see fans of different countries meeting up, hugging, exchanging momentums, having a laugh. The way they create that whole kind of fever that you feel, you know, when there's a big tournament going on in that place, the way they interact with the locals, you know, the idea that something special is going on in that place. And particularly this being a Euro, which is spread around, whatever your opinions are of that, and it feels very strange, particularly in the current circumstances, often being in slightly unusual venues, you see how much it means to people who live in, say, Ekaterinburg in Russia, where I was at the last World Cup, in Siberia, whose joy at hosting and seeing people from Senegal or you know, whichever country was floating through, was really, it's heartwarming stuff, and that will be sadly missed.
You know, I completely agree. The only Euro I've been to was in 2012, but I was stuck in the same hotel as the Italian national team in Poland. And that was crazy, having all the fans in Warsaw just surrounding us. But Rafa, yourself, the disappointment of the tournament?
I think North Macedonia will not be able to follow up from their 2-1 defeat of Germany. Will get knocked out in the group. On a slightly more serious note, I think Italy will be disappointment. I mean, maybe the expectations aren't that big, but I still don't think this is a particularly good team. They have a few young and interesting players coming through, but very little by way of genuine world class. I mean, there's Marco Verratti, but then if you ask a France team or a Spanish team, Spain we haven't even talked about, or Germany and Portugal, you know, what Italian player would you pick? They wouldn't really go down the list with many names. So I think they're still not the power that they used to be. And I think we'll see that. Can I just mention that I forgot to mention Austria as well as one of my choices to be one of the more surprising successes. They have an easy group, relatively speaking. And they have a really good team, and they have Sasa Kalajdzic, one of the strikers who I think will really make a big difference at this Euro.
Yeah, and this is why I love football, because opinions will differ from person to person. You're saying Italy will be disappointment of the tournament. In a previous recording, one of your fellow athletic journalists said they would be the dark horses. I love it. Absolutely.
Well, that was probably James Horncastle, our Italian correspondent.
No, it wasn't. Not yet. He's coming with me next week. Because it was either Jack Pitbrook or Nancy Frostek. I can't remember who said. Right. Yes, one of the two. But thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to be able to talk football, talk shop with the both of you. And we look forward to your extended coverage on the Athletic for the tournament itself. Rafa and Amy, we'll speak to you soon.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having us.
And we'll be back with more previews of the Euros, of course, ahead of the tournament.